Om Namo Narayana, Jai Swami Narayan, Namaste. Welcome back as we work our way through the incredibly interesting Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This really is one of the most interesting Upanishads I've read so far. Today we're on part 3, section 7. Sorry, I had to hesitate for a moment. There's Roman numerals here and they confuse me. We will not be finishing part 3 today, and I don't even know if we'll go beyond part 7. But we will find out. But let's start in and see how far we get. Then Uddalaka, the son of Varuna, asked him. Yajnavalkya said, in Madra we lived in the house of Patanjala Kapya, a descendant of Kapi, studying the scriptures on sacrifices. His wife was possessed by a Gandharva. We asked him who he was. He said, Kabanda, the son of Atharvan. He said to Panchala Kapya and those who studied the scriptures on sacrifices, Hapya, do you know that sutra by which this life, the next life, and all beings are held together? Patanjala Kapya said, I do not know it, sir. The Gandharva said to him and the students, Kapya, do you know that eternal ruler who controls this and the next life, and all beings from within? Patanjala Kapya said, I do not know him, sir. The Gandharva said to him and the students, he who knows that sutra and that eternal ruler as above indeed knows Brahman, knows the worlds, knows the gods, knows the Vedas, knows beings, knows the self, and knows everything. He explained it all to them. I know it. If you, Yajnavalkya, do not know that sutra and that eternal ruler, and still take away the cows that belong only to the knowers of Brahman, your head shall fall off. I know, O Gautama, that sutra and that eternal ruler. Anyone can say, I know, I know. Please tell us what you know. He said, Vayu, O Gautama, is that sutra. Through this sutra, or Vayu, this and the next life and all beings are held together. Therefore, O Gautama, when a man dies, they say that his limbs have been loosened, for they are held together by the sutra, or Vayu. Quite so, Yajnavalkya. Now describe the eternal ruler. He who inhabits the earth, but is within it, whom the earth does not know, whose body is the earth, and who controls the earth from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits water, but is within it, whom water does not know, whose body is water, and who controls water from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits fire, but is within it, whom fire does not know, whose body is fire, and who controls fire from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the sky, but is within it, whom the sky does not know, whose body is the sky, and who controls the sky from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits air, but is within it, whom air does not know, whose body is air, and who controls air from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits heaven, but is within it, whom heaven does not know, whose body is heaven, and who controls heaven from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the sun, but is within it, whom the sun does not know, whose body is the sun, and who controls the sun from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the quarters, but is within it, whom the quarters do not know, whose body is the quarters, and who controls the quarters from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the moon and stars, but is within it, whom the moon and stars do not know, whose body is the moon and stars, and who controls the moon and stars from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the ether, but is within it, whom the ether does not know, whose body is the ether, and who controls the ether from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits darkness, but is within it, whom darkness does not know, whose body is darkness, and whom darkness controls from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits light, but is within it, whom light does not know, whose body is light, and who controls light from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. This much with reference to the gods. Now with reference to the beings. He who inhabits all beings, but is within it, whom no being knows, whose body is all beings, and who controls all beings from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. This much with reference to the beings. Now with reference to the body. He who inhabits the nose, but is within it, whom the nose does not know, whose body is the nose, and who controls the nose from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the organ of speech, but is within it, whom the organ of speech does not know, whose body is the organ of speech, and who controls the organ of speech from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the eye, but is within it, whom the eye does not know, whose body is the eye, and who controls the eye from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the ear, but is within it, whom the ear does not know, whose body is the ear, and who controls the ear from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the mind, but is within it, whom the mind does not know, whose body is the mind, and who controls the mind from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the skin, but is within it, whom the skin does not know, whose body is the skin, and who controls the skin from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the intellect, but is within it, whom the intellect does not know, whose body is the intellect, and who controls the intellect from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He who inhabits the organ of generation, but is within it, whom the organ of generation does not know, whose body is the organ of generation, and who controls the organ of generation from within, is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. He is never seen, but he is the witness. He is never heard, but he is the hearer. He is never thought, but he is the thinker. He is never known, but he is the knower. There is no other witness but him, no other hearer but him, no other thinker but him, no other knower but him. He is the eternal ruler, your own immortal self. Everything else but him is mortal. Thereupon Uddalaka, the son of Varuna, kept silent. And thus ends that section. Let us continue with part 3, section 8. Then the daughter of Vakshaknu said, Reverend Brahmins, I shall ask him 2 questions. Should he answer me those, none of you can ever beat him in describing Brahman. Please ask, Gargi. She said, I shall ask you 2 questions. As a man of Banaras, or the king of Videha, scion of a warlike destiny, might string his unstrung bow and appear close by, carrying in his hand 2 bamboo-tipped arrows highly painful to the enemy. Even so, dear Yajnavalkya, do I confront you with these 2 questions. Answer me those. Please ask, dear Gargi. She said, By what, Yajnavalkya, is that pervaded which is above heaven and below the earth, which is this heaven and earth, as well as between them, and which they say was, is, and will be? Yajnavalkya replied, That, O Gargi, which is above heaven and below the earth, which is this heaven and earth, as well as between them, and which they say was, is, and will be, is pervaded by the unmanifested ether. Gargi replied, I bow to you, Yajnavalkya, who have fully answered this question of mine. Now be ready for the second question. Please ask, O Gargi, Yajnavalkya said. She said, By what is that pervaded which is above heaven and below the earth, which is this heaven and earth as well as between them, and which they say was, is, and will be? Yajnavalkya replied, That, O Gargni, which is above heaven and below the earth, which is this heaven and earth as well as between them, and which they say was, is, and will be, is pervaded by the unmanifested ether alone. Gargi asked, By what is the unmanifested ether pervaded? He replied, O Gargi, the knowers of Brahman say, This immutable Brahman is that. It is neither gross nor minute, neither short nor long, neither red color nor oiliness, neither shadow nor darkness, neither air nor ether, unattached, neither savor nor odor, without eyes or ears, without the vocal organ or mind, non-luminous, without the vital force or mouth, not a measure, or without interior or exterior. It does not eat anything, nor is it eaten by anybody. Under the mighty rule of this immutable, the sun and moon are held in their positions. Under this mighty rule of the immutable, heaven and earth maintain their positions. Under the mighty rule of the immutable, moments, muhurtas, days and nights, fortnights, months, seasons, and years are held in their respective places under the mighty rule of the immutable. O Gargi, some rivers flow eastward from the White Mountains, others flow westward and continue in that direction, and still others keep to their respective courses under the mighty rule of this immutable. Men praise those that give. The gods depend on the sacrificer, and the manes on independent offerings. He, dear Gargi, who in this world, without knowing this immutable, offers oblations in the fire, performs sacrifices, and undergoes austerities even for many thousands of years, finds all such acts but perishable. He who departs from this world without knowing this immutable is miserable. But he who departs from this world after knowing this immutable is a knower of Brahman. This immutable, my dear Gargi, is never seen, but is the witness. It is never heard, but is the hearer. It is never thought, but is the thinker. It is never known, but is the knower. There is no other witness but this, no other hearer but this, no other thinker but this, no other knower but this. By this immutable is the unmanifested ether pervaded. Gargi replied, Reverend Brahmins, you should consider yourselves fortunate if you can get off from him through salutations. Never shall any of you beat him in describing Brahman. Then Gargi, the daughter of Vakshaknu, kept silent. And thus ends this part, and that's a good place to stop. I didn't realize those two sections kind of tied together as well as they did. This is a very repetitious Upanishad, saying the same thing over and over and over again. But I once heard, no, let me rephrase that. I have heard many times from the esteemed teacher, Sri Acharya, of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, that when the Vedas repeat something, they want you to know it. They want you to get it. It is not to be ignored. When something is repeated and repeated and repeated, that's not just for the sake of chanting. That is because you are to know this. So as a writer, I will agree with that. When I write stuff, and I write fiction and nonfiction, when I repeat something, it's because I want to make sure you got it. So it might seem a little tiresome, and you'd be like fast forwarding this video, but in actuality, these are very, very important points, and that's why they are repeated over and over again. Anyways, we're going to end here. This is just a fun Upanishad. I hope you're really enjoying this one, and we have quite a ways to go, actually. And until the next time, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Swaminarayan, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.